creates a sinkhole that can swallow a mansion. A dance party turns deadly when designer skywalks collapse. A dangerous cloud of gas explodes into a fiery industrial disaster. Dikes and levees give way to floodwaters that claim the lives of millions. And the miracle mineral turns out to be an invisible killer that suffocates thousands each year. Now, engineering disasters on Modern Marvels. Liquefied natural gas, or LNG, has become an increasingly popular energy choice for many nations. Though LNG has enjoyed a relatively safe track record, it can be an extremely dangerous commodity, capable of causing massive fires. LNG is natural gas in a liquid form. When natural gas is cooled to minus 259 degrees Fahrenheit, it becomes a clear, colorless, odorless liquid.
By liquefying the natural gas, you reduce its volume by a factor of about 640, so you make it much, much smaller in volume, and it allows you to store it much more economically.
This property of LNG allows for cost-effective transport of massive quantities of natural gas. Today, more than 150 LNG ocean tankers transport over 110 million metric tons of LNG annually to ports around the world. By 2010, LNG is projected to fulfill 10% of U.S. energy needs.
There are currently 70 storage facilities called peak shaving plants in North America. They store LNG for peak demands. We also have 5 LNG import terminals and 1 export terminal in the U.S. By 2010, we probably will have 5 or 6 more import terminals.
The concept of liquefying natural gas dates back to the 19th century. Its practical advantages were, and still are, appealing. 60 years ago, the city of Cleveland built the first commercial LNG facility in the U.S. It was there that the full scope of LNG's deadly potential would be realized.
We're standing here on the epicenter of where the East Ohio Gas Company explosion affair occurred in 1944, and it's indeed on this very site, on the green grass of what is now Gardena Park, where the 4 enormous liquefaction, degasification, natural gas storage tanks once stood.
On October 20th, 1944, a storage tank at the East Ohio Gas Company failed.
Suddenly, at 2:41 p.m. on an otherwise unremarkable fall day, the world ended in the Norwood St. Clair area.
Leaking LNG vapor ignited, and the resulting explosion and fire killed 128 people. 79 homes, 2 factories, and 217 cars were destroyed. The East Ohio Gas Company began building LNG facilities in 1940, as intense wartime manufacturing contributed to repeated natural gas shortages.
So what they would do essentially was, when the demand was low, they would take on gaseous natural gas, liquefy it, and store it. And when the demand was high, they would then regasify the liquefied natural gas and use it at that time.
3 57-foot-tall liquid natural gas tanks, each capable of storing 50 million cubic feet of LNG, were put into operation by early 1941.
Those 3 tanks were of spherical construction, and the support was from vertical columns that connected up to an equatorial beam that went around those spheres. That plant operated just fine with those 3 tanks for a couple of years, and the demand increased, and the plant then obtained approval to construct a 4th tank.
The number 4 tank held 100 million cubic feet of LNG, double the amount of the previous tanks. It was a cylindrical shape and more stable because it was supported from the base. As with the first 3 tanks, number 4 was constructed using a 3.5% nickel steel alloy. All of the tanks were built on East Ohio gas property, situated adjacent to the densely populated Cleveland neighborhood called Norwood.
There was no template of experience for people, I think, either at the technical level or the neighborhood level, to have any understanding of the danger that they were inviting in their neighborhood.
At about 2:30 p.m. on October 20th, 1944, several residents of Norwood noticed white, steam-like vapors creeping out from tank number 4. Leaking gas from the tank ignited, causing a massive explosion and fire. Houses 8 blocks away from the tanks instantly began to burn.
When I first saw the fire, and the only time I saw the fire is when I was turning down, I was running down East 61st Street, turned around and looked back, and I saw this sky full of fire, full of flame, and it was like the sun had come to earth.
The burning and the fires reached temperatures of 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The flames were at their peak probably 2,800 feet in the air.
If LNG leaks out of its sub-zero container, it will not immediately dissipate. In its liquid form, natural gas is heavier than air, and it will stay close to the ground. The LNG can linger for up to 30 minutes before warming enough to evaporate, ample time for an ignition source to spark an explosion. The tank in Cleveland contained 90 million cubic feet of LNG, which spread as an invisible vapor cloud into the street and sewer system.
Essentially, the neighborhood, just before the first initial explosion occurred, is best thought of as a sort of a saturated wick.
Pilot lights ignited the cloud once it was inside, and houses burned from the inside out. Firefighters were helpless as the water supply system was decimated by multiple explosions. The fire continued to smolder for 3 days after the explosion. The spread of the fire was attributed to several causes, but one fatal flaw was to blame for the initial leak in tank number 4. The properties of 3.5% nickel steel alloys, when subjected to sub-freezing temperatures, were not thoroughly understood. It was later learned that a higher concentration of nickel was needed to ensure steel's integrity in sub-freezing conditions. The steel alloy lining of tank number 4 was weakened by the cold temperatures of the LNG, which allowed a crack to form.
There was a small leak, and the crack propagated, the leak got large, and it dumped the entire tank.
Today, LNG tanks are made with either stainless steel or a steel alloy with 9% nickel, both of which maintain their strength at freezing temperatures. Other fundamental improvements have also become standard procedure in modern LNG facilities.
One of the major changes since Cleveland is that facilities are very well instrumented for any hazards. And this is for vapor, any escaped vapor, any fires, the flame detectors, such that you can detect immediately any hazard. And this is part of the philosophy of trying to anticipate any troubles as soon as possible before they happen.
Since the Cleveland tragedy, LNG tanks are surrounded by berms and dikes, which can contain the entire contents of a tank. Additionally, an exclusion zone is determined for each facility, keeping populated areas at a safe distance, even in the event of an accident. LNG is touted as a safe energy source, but in early 2004, an explosion at an export facility in Skikda, Algeria, killed 27 people.
There's no question that an accident of the magnitude of the Skikda accident raises questions associated with the safety of LNG, but it is premature to read into that, in my opinion, given that we just don't know what occurred.
Opponents to proposed LNG import terminals fear that terrorists targeting an LNG tanker in port could turn the vast stores of supercooled gas into a mile-wide ignitable vapor cloud.
Recently there has been concern about intentional damage to a facility. Any feasible attack would have results that are less than the maximum credible accident that the facility and exclusion zones are already designed for.
Offshore import terminals are being developed as an alternative to minimize the risk of potential damage, since they would be several miles from land. The Cleveland disaster provided the foundation for the safe handling of liquefied natural gas. But despite safety measures and technological improvements, the growing number of LNG facilities will continue to create opportunities for another disaster. Since the first cargoes of LNG were shipped on a regular commercial basis in 1964, over 32,000 shipments have been made without a single incident of LNG being lost through a breach or failure of the ship's tanks. Engineering disasters will return on Modern Marvels.
Tech Tuesday is brought to you in part by Verizon Wireless.
Can you hear me now?
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Good.
We ask the same question over and over
Can you hear me now?
so that you don't have to.
Good.
Verizon Wireless has fewer dropped calls than any other wireless network.
Can you hear me now?
It's what makes us the most reliable wireless network in the nation.
Now. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Good.
Verizon Wireless.
Can you hear me now?
We never stop working for you.
Good.
Nobody stands behind their cars like Mitsubishi, because every new Mitsubishi now comes with a 10-year powertrain warranty, 5-year bumper-to-bumper warranty, and 3 years free scheduled maintenance. Now get up to $5,000 factory cash back on the best back cars in the world.
When hard work is combined with pure talent, a merely good performance is transformed into a brilliant one. It's true of every art, including the art of investing. Talk to your advisor about Oppenheimer funds, the right way to invest.
Paris. Love is in the air. Love? Is that what you see? What do you see? I see commerce. I see industry. I see medicine. A second opinion from a continent away. I see mortgage approvals, video, audio, downloadable, on demand, a million wireless transactions. That's what I see. You're such a romantic. I know.
The on-demand world in Paris and everywhere with help from IBM.
This is the working man, the builder of America, exposed to asbestos, diagnosed with the diseases of the working man, lung cancer, mesothelioma, asbestosis, robbed of a healthy life. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed, Barron & Budd could help you and your family find justice. Call the law firm of Barron & Budd. It's time for justice.
But your Houston area Lexus dealer.
Like a plague, its onset was swift. An infestation of the unholiest kind. But in 1692, a crime against God was a crime against state. Witch Hunt, Sunday at 8 on the History Channel. Check out what's coming up tomorrow night on Modern Marvels Wednesday, here on the History Channel.
We now return to engineering disasters on Modern Marvels. Kansas City, July 17th, 1981. Close to 1,500 people gathered at the newly built Hyatt Hotel for a dance competition. The hotel was less than a year old and featured innovative architectural designs. At 7:45 p.m., as some danced and others looked down on the festive atmosphere from skywalks, the fourth floor, 60-ton walkway gave way. It landed on the second floor skywalk below, and both walkways fell to the lobby floor. 114 people were killed. This was the single largest structural disaster in terms of loss of life in U.S. history. The investigation following the disaster would reveal an accumulation of project management errors, which ultimately allowed for a simple yet deadly flaw to be installed in the support system of the overhead walkways. The Kansas City Hyatt was a stunning example of current architectural innovation when it first opened its doors in July of 1980.
Well, the Hyatt Hotel in downtown Kansas City was commissioned to be an architecturally interesting and imposing structure. The lobby, when you walked in, was 4 stories high.
One of the signature features about the Hyatt Hotel in Kansas City was the fact that they had a set of suspended walkways. They were there to capture the attention of visitors that walked in because they looked like they were virtually suspended in air.
But few realized that the hotel had a problematic history.
This hotel was envisioned as a large part of the downtown redevelopment and was commissioned on a fast track. Get it up.
The hotel then went through a fast track in which we built this whole hotel between 1978 and 1980. We built a huge hotel which consists of an underground parking garage and including the tower in a period of 2.5 to 2.75 years.
The fast track method, which is still used today, entails continuing to design components of a structure as others are already being built. The expedited construction of the Hyatt was further complicated by staffing problems.
In 1979, construction of the hotel is going apace, but certain management and personnel problems show up.
Somehow, because of the problems of fast track, because of the changes on the design team, the designer, the design engineer, the engineer of record, and the chief detailer resigned somewhere in the middle of the project. This project was transferred to somebody else.
During these personnel shifts, a minor design change in the connections supporting the atrium walkways was overlooked. In the original blueprints, a single metal rod ran through a hollow steel beam called a box beam. The rod carried the weight of each walkway to a roof truss.
The original box beam construction was supposed to be a continuous rod. It was supposed to be one rod that went through the 4th floor and picked up the 2nd floor independently.
The design was difficult to build, so the steel fabricator made a request to replace the single rod with 2 separate rods, thereby creating new connection points in the 4th floor beams. This modification left the 2nd floor walkway hanging from the 4th floor instead of the ceiling, doubling the load on the 4th floor box beam connections. The new walkway design needed to be drawn in detail, and new weight calculations needed to be included. Several levels of project managers approved the new bridge design, with the simple yet crucial load calculations missing.
It wasn't that this connection was misdesigned. This connection was never designed. That was the problem. It was detailed, but in changes and movements of the detail between the different parties, it never got engineered. And as it became part of various detailed plans, people kept assuming that the design had been checked at some point in the process.
Hyatt engineer Jack Gillum gave the undesigned connections the final seal of approval, and they were installed. There was an opportunity to catch the flawed design in October of 1979, when during construction, a section of the atrium roof collapsed. Construction was halted, and the building was inspected.
We checked all of the connections to the roof, and but we did not check anything any further at that time. We did not look at the bridges whatsoever.
So literally, the whole lobby, all of the design details were checked. Even the rods suspending the walkways were looked at, and no one thought to go to where the walkways connected together and down to each other and say, what's that connection and how is it designed? But unfortunately and literally, the check stopped one connection too short.
In November, construction began again, and the hotel opened the following summer. Over the next year, the steel box beam connections slowly deformed. On the evening of July 17th, A weekly dance competition was being covered by local news crews. Reporter Michael Mahoney was reaching for a videotape when disaster struck.
I was reaching down, sort of looking at the floor, and heard these really sharp metallic pop, pop, like that. The walkway on the second floor began to sag and then finally broke apart. There were people trapped underneath these huge blocks of concrete. There were people that had been speared by the broken glass from the side rails of the walkways.
Investigators who were on the scene within hours after the collapse discovered glaring clues as to what had happened.
When I get there, there's just 6 rods hanging silently from the ceiling where the walkways have pulled off and collapsed. By the first morning, we all knew what had happened. There was no question. And there are some classic photographs that we and others have taken of the joint where the 2 lips are bent through and they're perfectly straight.
Analysis of the debris enabled forensic engineers to reenact the chain of events, giving them a clear picture of how the overstressed box beam connections failed.
Literally, you had a situation where the rod was pulling up at the bottom of the C, and this bottom set of thumbs was the whole load-bearing structure for the 2 sections. Well, of course, what happened in the disaster is the rod pulls right through.
The National Bureau of Standards report indicated that the box beam connection failure was inevitable.
The design should have considered larger nut, or even better and simpler, consider a plate with a hole that would be like a distribution plate or spacer that would be put there. That plate probably would cost something outrageous like 40 cents, maybe $1 with the hole. That what would have prevented this failure.
The Hyatt tragedy was as much about process as it was physics.
Most importantly, what the investigation revealed, that the process by which we design and build structures needs to be more rigorous and higher level of quality control.
The engineers who affixed their approval seals to the incomplete shop drawings lost their licenses.
Where does the buck stop on this thing? Well, it stops, I mean, who are the responsible people? I mean, everybody should be responsible for their own work. Okay, so does it stop with the owner? Was the owner responsible for certain things? Probably, yes. The contractor, yes. The fabricator, yes. But it really stops in only one place. It stops with the structural engineer who put his seal on the drawings. And that was me.
The Kansas City Hyatt was a much-changed building when it reopened its doors 11 weeks after the disaster.
The walkways are back. But all of the elegance of the original design, the etherealness, the thinness of support, that is gone. It has been replaced with a gigantic pillar system that has to be over-designed by a factor of 20. I think in part to ensure that there's confidence that those walkways will never come down again.
The collapse was a wake-up call to engineers.
As a result of this disaster, the codes that govern the structural design of buildings of this type were actually changed. There was a very explicit articulation in the subsequent revision of the codes of where the responsibility for this engineering analysis lies, thereby hopefully ensuring that you'll never have a situation again where someone assumes someone else is doing it because it's not clear in their minds just who's really got the responsibility to do it.
The 114 lives lost in the Hyatt Skywalk collapse serve as a lasting reminder to engineers that the smallest of errors can lead to the largest of tragedies. City building inspectors averaged just 8 minutes a week inspecting the 40-story Hyatt Hotel during its 28-month-long construction. Engineering Disasters will return on Modern Marvels.
Tomorrow on Modern Marvels Wednesday, it was a scientific experiment shrouded in secrecy, a specially fortified plane that would be able to fly beyond the speed of sound. Its success forever changed the face of aviation.
We have gone from merely penetrating it to actually thriving.
Modern Marvels, breaking the sound barrier. Tomorrow at 8 on the History Channel.
For the feeling of freer breathing, Vicks Vapora works as fast. As fast as you can put it on. Can your cold medicine do that? Get the Quick Vicks.
Paris. Love is in the air. Love? Is that what you see? What do you see? I see commerce. I see industry. I see medicine. Second opinion from a continent away. I see mortgage approvals, video, audio, downloadable, on demand, 1 million wireless transactions. That's what I see. You're such a romantic. I know.
The on-demand world in Paris and everywhere with help from IBM. Introducing Tide with a touch of Downy. An irresistible combination of softness and cream. New Tide with a touch of Downy.
Right now you can stay in a select Disney Value Resort for as little as $55 per night per room. And one of our theme parks will be open a whole hour early. Now that's an offer that's hard to resist, no matter who you are. A great hotel for as little as $55 with transportation and early admission. Call now for your dream vacation.
Shade. Blend. Whiten. Crest Spin Brush Pro Whitening. 2 moving heads and polishing bristles. Brush away stains for whiter teeth in 14 days. Guaranteed.
I remember it like it was yesterday. I was hosting my first big business dinner, and I paid with my Visa card. Turns out I was over my limit. I was so embarrassed, I didn't know what to do. So I got the American Express card, and it never happened again.
Call now for the American Express card. We can take your application right over the phone.
Applying for the card was one of the easiest things I've ever done, and smartest. Because American Express is there for me, whether I'm out shopping or on vacation. I feel better knowing that.
Now the card has rewards built in. I get a point for virtually every dollar I spend, plus double points at places I shop the most, like supermarkets and gas stations. And I can redeem them for just about anything, from a trip to Rome to a flat-screen TV.
So call now for the American Express card. You can apply right over the phone.
It helped not having a preset spending limit.
It's great earning double points at so many places.
I can call 24 hours a day. That helps.
Call 1-800-THE-CARD and apply now. There's never been a better time to be a card member.
Can inspiration make the town and country even more amazing? Yes. Can it be luxurious and still rate high in safety? With front and rear crumple zones and a 5-star side impact crash test rating? Yes. Can it find a place for everything? As the only minivan with stowable seating and storage? Of course. The amazing new Chrysler Town and Country. Chrysler. Inspiration comes standard. Qualified returning Daimler Chrysler owners can get up to $3,500 in combined cash allowances. America's hottest products are at your Chrysler dealer.
We now return to engineering disasters on Modern Marvels. Naturally occurring sinkholes surface every day in several regions of the United States, particularly Florida, sometimes wreaking havoc in populated areas. Many urban areas, though, are plagued by another kind of sinkhole, those formed by the breakdown of man-made infrastructure hidden under a bustling city. A common culprit is the collapse of a deteriorating sewer pipe.
As far as sewer collapses, they're of course not a natural phenomenon. They're because of a man-made condition. But again, you have the similarity between those and the natural phenomenon because you have water that's basically carrying away soils.
During the early 1900s, rapidly expanding cities around the country began building networks of sewer tunnels. Close to a century later, many of these aging tunnel-like pipes have begun to fail, sometimes with deadly consequences.
The potential for this kind of thing can happen anywhere. And a lot of it just depends on how old these lines are and what may have been placed on top of them. Because the original designs probably never anticipated some of the conditions that they're exposed to now.
On December 11th, 1995, residents of an oceanside community in San Francisco witnessed just how catastrophic a sewer collapse could be.
There's a geyser of water coming out on a fancy street in San Francisco, and there's a tide of sewage flowing down past people's lawns. And this went on for 45 minutes until finally the sewer collapsed. It broke. It's like you just got a machete and you just chopped through the garden hose. And at that point, the water just goes glug, glug, glug.
Neighbors watched helplessly as a multi-million-dollar home slid into a massive sinkhole. The sinkhole also damaged several nearby homes. The flow of heavy rains from the previous night was obstructed by a gate in the sewer line. The gate was being used to temporarily block sewage flow during construction on pipes downstream.
Concluded that this gate had been left in a partly lowered position. So it's a bit like if you have a garden hose and the water's just flowing through it and you put your foot on the garden hose, squeeze down on it, you pressurize the garden hose so that this gate created a pressure, and that pressure was felt all the way up, 1,500 feet up.
The pressurized water needed another way out. Nearby sewer construction created a small sinkhole above the sewer line. It grew during each rainfall, creating a weak point over the tunnel, and provided an ideal location for the water to break through. The San Francisco sinkhole didn't injure anyone, but a sinkhole in Atlanta destroyed more than property. In the early morning hours of June 14, 1993, just as a severe rainstorm was tapering off, 2 employees of the Marriott Courtyard Hotel in Atlanta, Georgia, were meeting in the hotel parking lot. Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to cave in. Within seconds, they were swept into a massive and watery chasm. They were innocent victims of a sewer collapse that resulted in an 80-foot deep by 100-foot wide sinkhole. Ensuing investigations delved into the 100-year history of the site and into the installation of a safety device that's very presence contributed to the sudden sinkhole formation.
The sewer that collapsed, the Orange Street Trunk Sewer, was constructed in the early 1900s. It was an unreinforced concrete arch, and it was cutting edge for that particular time because prior to that, most of the sewers had been constructed of brick.
Like many other sewer lines of the day, the Orange Street Trunk was built above ground, simply a tube resting in a creek bed that utilized the natural slope of the stream. But during the 1960s, the tunnel was buried with fill from nearby freeway construction. Warehouses were then built over it.
The condition that the improvements resulted in on that particular site raised that elevation to approximately 30 to 42 feet above the invert of the sewer. So it added a lot more weight above that structure than existed over it at any point during this previous history.
In 1971, on the same site as the future Marriott parking lot, a 98-foot wide sinkhole formed under a warehouse.
The site was investigated, it was opened up, reconstructed, repaired, and no life was lost.
In 1989, a hotel developer bought the neighboring lot. It was decided that the sewer line could support the hotel's surface parking lot. The design team, however, was concerned enough about the poor condition of the sewer that it researched safety devices for the site. A specialty contractor proposed a cost-effective and novel solution, burying an enormous geogrid, or safety net, between the parking lot and the sewer. The geogrid would alert people to a sinkhole by gradually sagging over an anticipated 20-foot wide void, suspending the parking lot for 100 hours, ample time to evacuate the area. But the ensuing sinkhole would overwhelm their estimates. Several days before the 1993 collapse, city workers inspected the sewer after reports of cracks in the hotel parking lot.
At that point, one of the city inspectors actually walked part of the line, and they noticed that the invert upstream of the manhole, which going toward the 1971 collapse zone, actually was heaved up.
2 days later, before scheduled sewer repairs could be done, Atlanta was hit with a severe rainstorm. Cracks in the sewer walls allowed water to run outside of the sewer.
The soil in the area was actually very silty, so it had a lot of very fine particles in it, and they're very susceptible to erosion.
So if there is exfiltration, infiltration, those fine particles get picked up and then get reintroduced into the sewer and basically create these voids. What happened that day was that basically the sewer was carrying away a lot of the fines, that the sidewalls could have collapsed at that point.
So much of the supporting soil was washed away that the sewer gave way. The catastrophic sewer collapse resulted in a sinkhole that was 100 feet wide, 5 times the estimated 20-foot diameter. The geogrid supported the parking lot for 5 hours, but in doing so, concealed typical sinkhole warning signs.
The early signs of distress were placed away from the center of what would later become the hole to the edges.
The geogrid was pulling at anchor points, creating multiple small depressions, instead of one larger and more obvious one. Since the collapse, the sewer was replaced by new reinforced concrete pipe. These recent sewer collapses have been a warning to cities around the country that still depend on century-old sewers. Replacing sewer lines is costly, so strengthening existing pipes is a more practical solution.
We've probably spent in the order of approximately $50 million in making improvements to just the combined sewers. And we've done that using a rehabilitation process called gunite. And gunite is simply a concrete that can be sprayed onto the wall of the existing pipe.
The gunite strengthens sewer walls, but new technologies, including remote-controlled cameras which detect leaks and voids in and around sewers, are aiding cities in the effort to catch failing sewers before they collapse and cause disaster. The sinkhole that swallowed the San Francisco mansion cost the city more than $18 million in repairs, cleanup, and claims by nearby property owners. Engineering Disasters will return on Modern Marvels.
Kings bowed to him, emperors fled from him, even wild horses knelt before him. Alexander the Great, Sunday, November 7th on the History Channel. He wasn't Alexander the Timid.
Can inspiration make the SUV safer? It can, with 5-star government crash test ratings. Available side curtain airbags for all 3 worlds, and all-wheel drive. The best rating of any SUV tested for rollover resistance. Chrysler Pacifica. We didn't just make an SUV, we made a safety utility vehicle. Chrysler. Inspiration comes standard.
And now get $1,000 in October bonus cash for a combined cash allowance of $3,000. America's hottest products are at your Chrysler dealer.
Boston Market's new seasonal dinner specials. Lemon herb rotisserie chicken, exotic pan-Asian grilled chicken with Asian salad, and spicy chipotle meatloaf. Plus brand new seasonal sides. Broccoli spears with hollandaise, potatoes au gratin, and cranberry walnut relish. Boston Market. We're always cooking.
Guys?
No way!
Yeah, I got us on the Verizon Wireless Family Share Plan, so we can talk to each other as much as we want.
And it's got in, so you can talk to your friends all you want to.
Awesome!
Group hug.
Okay, sign up for the Family Share Plan, and now the whole family can make unlimited in-calls to each other and any other Verizon Wireless customer from the America's Choice coverage area. Give me a call. Now announcing Verizon Wireless at Best Buy.
Can you hear me now? Good.
Verizon Wireless, we never stop working for you.
Surviving cancer is still the biggest victory of my life, and I did it with the help of 3 Bristol-Myers Squibb medicines.
Today, Bristol-Myers Squibb researchers are fighting our most serious diseases. Their life-saving medicines have turned many cancer patients into cancer survivors. Medicines for AIDS, heart disease, and serious mental illness reflect their commitment to research and to extending and enhancing human life.
I'm living proof of that. Hope, triumph, and the miracle of medicine. Bristol-Myers Squibb Company.
New Aquafresh Extreme Clean Whitening. It showers your whole mouth with microactive foam as it whitens, then leaves a cool tingling that just won't quit. New Extreme Clean Whitening. Bonjour, my dear. Hi, how are you? May I help you find something today?
Tangerine. That's fun, isn't it? I bet you look wonderful in pink.
Oh, that's adorable!
I don't like to call them colors. I like to call them flavors.
Don't do this to friends and loved ones. Instead of a gift certificate, give the American Express gift card. It's good in over 1 million places. American Express gift cards are easy to order. Just go to americanexpress.com/gift card. They can buy almost anything, from skirts to sushi to sporting goods. The American Express gift card. Instead of one place, it's good all over the place.
Get the power to multitask. Right now, get this Dimension desktop with the power and performance of an Intel Pentium 4 processor with HT technology. Yours for the amazing price of $999 after instant savings. Plus, get a free flat panel upgrade and free 2-day shipping. Other Dell desktops start at just $419, but you better call or go online soon. Get more out of multimedia with Dell and get more out of now. Dell PCs use Intel Pentium 4 processors with HT technology.
On the next conspiracy, anthrax attacks next.
We now return to engineering disasters on Modern Marvels. In 2004, a century-old levee in Northern California broke and flooded more than 12,000 acres of crops, causing an estimated $93.7 million in damages. Certainly a disaster, yet it couldn't compare to the devastation and staggering loss of life that China's Yangtze River Delta experienced in 1931, when a system of levees also failed to hold back rushing waters.
It burst through levees with the wall of water about 22 feet high and caused 3.7 million deaths. It was the third largest flood on record. It's the one that caused the most damage.
The Yangtze River Basin is very large. The Yangtze River is about 6,300 kilometers long, and the basin have a very unique characteristics that is very high from the upstream region. The original source of the Yangtze River is from the Tibet-Qinghai Plateau, which have elevations 3,500 to 5,000 meters, then rush down to the middle ridge about 2,000 to 500 meters high, and then to the flatter area downstream, and then empty into the sea at Shanghai.
Due to the powerful flow of the river, called the Dragon by the Chinese, great floods historically raged through this area about every 10 years.
There's two major reasons. One is the high plateau in the upstream ridges, and they concentrate the rainfall very quickly to the downstream, the middle and lower ridges. The other reason is a lot of moist cloud storms gathered from the Bay of Bengal and Indian Ocean come to the high mountains, and that produce enormous flood.
The main flood protection in this area was provided by a system of makeshift levees built by the generations of farmers who lived there.
So levees are built along the banks of rivers, so they're built up in layers. Back in the 1800s, these would probably be compacted with animals. So there's levees around that are hundreds of years old that are very susceptible to high water, erosion, earthquakes, water overtopping them, and you have these failures.
While the Chinese were threatened by an imminent Japanese invasion in the summer of 1931, a series of very heavy storms passed through this region when there should have only been two.
This is a perfect storm situation where the right meteorological conditions occurred, where storms sat over the river basin for a long time period, and then it just overwhelms the system that's designed to contain them.
Dongting Lake was flanked by some of China's oldest levees. The lowlands that surround it are just 105 feet above sea level. When the levees failed, Dongting became a vast inland sea.
It's like wall water and the height of a two-story building coming through. And when that happens, of course, it erodes the levee upstream and downstream.
The waters rose above the rooftops of homes in large population centers, including Nanking and Wuhan. And 51 million people, 1/4 of China's population at the time, became homeless. They were the lucky ones. Approximately 145,000 people were killed by the flood itself, while millions of others suffered later deaths due to disease and starvation caused by the disaster. The area near Wuhan remained flooded for more than 4 months, the depth of the water exceeding 6 feet, and in places more than 20 feet. With the country now at war with Japan, recovering from the disaster was difficult, and maintaining and building a stronger infrastructure was not an immediate priority.
Since 1931, there's another war. The Japanese invasion is 1937 to 1945, and then there's a civil war 1945 to 1949. So after 1949, the current government has done quite a bit to control the flood. And they have established local river basins, and they upgrade the major levees.
In 1992, they also began constructing the Three Gorges Dam, a controversial dam that rises 600 feet into the sky and stretches 1.5 miles across the river. It's due to be completed in 2009.
The Three Gorges Dam have so much flood carrying capacity is about 21 billion cubic meters. For example, if the 1931 flood happens again, most of the flood can be contained by the Three Gorges project reservoir, and that will reduce the damage tremendously.
Some disagree.
The Three Gorges Dam will provide some flood protection in the lower reaches, but it's not going to stop all the floods. But any storms that occur downstream of the dam, which is a very large area, contains huge populations. This area is susceptible to floods, and there's no dams to protect that.
The impacts of the Three Gorges Dam on flooding are very ambiguous. It's a double-edged sword in the sense that the dam will also trap the sediments, the silt. It will increase the level of the riverbed, and so it will mean it will increase the flooding risks for the population upstream.
Perhaps the Three Gorges Dam and other flood walls will be able to harness the Yangtze's fury. But the Great Flood of 1931 taught a lesson through death and misery. The dragon is not easily tamed. Preceding the Great Flood of 1931, China suffered a drought between 1928 and 1930 that claimed the lives of 3 million. Engineering Disasters will return on Modern Marvels.
On the next conspiracy, anthrax attacks next. Now on home video from the History Channel. Own your copy of this program delivered directly to you for just $24.95 plus shipping and handling. To order, call 1-800-708-1776 or shop historychannel.com. Tech Tuesday is brought to you in part by Chrysler.
Can inspiration make the town and country even more amazing? Yes. Can it be luxurious and still rate high in safety? With front and rear crumple zones and a 5-star side impact crash test rating? Yes. Can it find a place for everything? As the only minivan with stowable seating and storage? Of course. The amazing new Chrysler Town and Country. Chrysler. Inspiration comes standard.
Qualified returning Daimler Chrysler owners can get up to $3,500 in combined cash allowances. America's hottest products are at your Chrysler dealer.
Every motion picture begins with a single dramatic frame. Introducing the Hitachi Ultravision Cineform Series Plasma High Definition Television. Exclusive plasma technologies deliver the smoothest film-like picture. Original technologies, seamless integration. Only from Hitachi.
What if business no longer meant business travel? Microsoft Office Live Meeting. The service that lets you be in different places, but still on the same page. See for yourself with a free trial. All it takes is a phone, PC, and an internet connection, and you can collaborate with groups of all sizes. It's like being at the same table, even if you're worlds apart. Visit Microsoft.com/meet now or call us today.
Everything my Roadrunner does is fast, like sending my grandpa video clips of my school's football team. Or downloading music with Roadrunner Rhapsody. Or sending this one to Gramps. Yeah! Roadrunner High Speed Online is one more reason why with Time Warner Cable, now anything's possible.
I like sharing music too.
Call 1-800-ROADRUNNER and get your first 6 months at $29.95 per month, plus free installation.
This is the working man, the builder of America, exposed to asbestos, diagnosed with the diseases of the working man, lung cancer, mesothelioma, asbestosis, robbed of a healthy life. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed, Barron and Budd could help you and your family find justice. Call the law firm of Barron and Budd. It's time for justice.
What's in a name? At genealogy.com, discover the history of your family. Now with the free trial membership, it's even easier to begin. Visit genealogy.com today.
In 1692, a crime against God was a crime against state. Witch Hunt, Sunday at 8 on the History Channel.
We now return to engineering disasters on Modern Marvels. Asbestos is the disaster of the century that took a century to uncover. It claims 10,000 American lives each year and thousands more worldwide.
I can think of no substance in the American workplace that has caused more disease and death than the use of asbestos.
When the World Trade Center towers collapsed in 2001, over 1.2 million tons of identified and unidentified hazardous substances, including asbestos, filled the skies over Manhattan.
There was enough asbestos in the North Tower of the World Trade Center to create an environmental catastrophe when the building collapsed.
Days after the attacks, the Environmental Protection Agency and Occupational Safety and Health Administration found no excessive levels of asbestos in the air, except at or near ground zero, and deemed that the air contamination was not a public health threat. However, that testing may only tell part of the story.
Generally, when these exposures occur, the monitoring that takes place occurs 3 or 4 days after the event, so we don't know what immediately was into the environment and what immediately people were breathing that were around the event. There are many people who participated in the recovery process and the cleanup process that did not wear proper respiratory equipment. Many of them have reported the presence of what is known as the World Trade Center cough, which is a type of acute reaction to the dust that contained all types of toxins, including asbestos.
Once touted as the miracle mineral, asbestos in Greek means inextinguishable or incombustible. The mineral's fire-retardant qualities are among its most valuable characteristics. But asbestos is also dangerous. It lurks silently in our walls, pipes, roof shingles, tiles, brake pads, and in the air we breathe. Asbestos was first mined commercially in Quebec, Canada in the late 1800s. The rock-like mineral separates easily into very small airborne fibers. And it is this aerodynamic substance that becomes harmful when inhaled.
These fibers can break down and get into the respiratory tract. If you don't breathe the fibers in, they're not really a danger, but those that you can breathe in come into the lung, and because they're natural, they're virtually indestructible. So they continue in the lung to cause a scarring of the lung and eventually leads to a breathing problem that we now call asbestosis.
In 1924, results from an autopsy performed on a 33-year-old woman who worked in an asbestos textile factory for 20 years presented the first clear case of death due to asbestosis.
Then in 1930, the British epidemiological study came about of the textile mill workers that showed a much higher prevalence of death and disease from asbestosis in people that manufactured textile products.
Despite this and similar reports, the asbestos industry in the U.S. continued to mine, manufacture, and use asbestos in over 3,000 consumer products.
The more knowledge that
was published in the medical literature about asbestos causing first asbestosis, then lung cancer, then mesothelioma, then other cancers such as gastrointestinal cancers, the more asbestos was being produced and sold to the American public.
The industry had long known that asbestos was dangerous, yet it continued to use it without protecting or warning its employees and consumers.
Insurance companies knew that asbestos was a risk very early on. In fact, in 1918, an insurance company representative by the name of Hoffman wrote that insurance companies were reluctant to insure people who mined asbestos. They didn't know how to describe asbestosis. They didn't use the term asbestosis, but they knew that workers in this trade died early, and they died rapidly, and they died much more often than workers in other industries.
Well, the asbestos industry was aware of this. During the 1930s, it's very clear that the asbestos industry were actually sponsoring research into the area of asbestos and asbestos-related disease. And there are notes in the literature and the letters in the literature saying this is what we're finding, and when cancer came about as a suspicion, let's not mention cancer.
Unfortunately, it took decades and thousands of deaths before the industry's dirty little secret was revealed. But fortunately for future victims and their families, the asbestos industry left a paper trail long enough to hang itself.
So there is just a vast amount of evidence out there that employers knew about asbestos hazards.
Officials of the asbestos companies knew in the 1940s and the 1950s that asbestos could cause cancer, and in the 1960s they were very well aware that asbestos exposure could cause mesothelioma. But it wasn't until the late 1960s or the early 1970s that these companies ever placed warning labels on their products.
Finally, in 1972, when the Occupational Safety and Health Administration was established, the first substance it regulated was asbestos.
Virtually impossible for any employer to use asbestos in the workplace to an extent where there was visible dust, which meant that as a result, pipe coverings that contained asbestos cements, and all of the various dusty products that asbestos was used in ceased to be commercially viable anymore.
By the early 1980s, companies like Brickley Environmental in San Bernardino, California, have worked on the remediation of asbestos in schools, office buildings, banks, airports, and other commercial use facilities.
The material that we're actually going to be removing today is the acoustical ceiling texture, which is above us. This material contains asbestos. The process for removal will be to get the containment set up, negative pressure installed, which you can see down at the end of the hallway down there.
The negative pressure system sucks air out of the work area through a series of filters and discharges that air outside, creating a negative pressure in the work area, which ensures that asbestos fibers cannot escape the containment.
Once that negative pressure is established, the containment is set up, decon is set up, the crew will suit up, put on respirators, come in, wet this material down, and manually begin scraping it. As they scrape the material, they'll package it, bag it, and process it for final disposal.
Despite the efforts to reduce the amount of asbestos manufactured and used in the United States, the asbestos crisis is far from over.
Asbestos products continue to be sold today. Many people think that asbestos has been banned, but in fact, there is no ban of asbestos products.
As long as asbestos remains in the air we breathe, asbestos cases will remain in the courts.
And because of the numbers of people who have been injured by the inhalation of asbestos, we have hundreds of thousands of cases pending in the court system.
Thousands of men and women who built our country in the decades following World War II have already paid the price.
The people that are dying today are generally people that have been exposed 20, 30 years ago. I think that asbestos has become a disaster in the engineering sense because while it has so many useful usage, the overwhelming problems have been that those are outweighed by the epidemic.
Odorless and tasteless. This invisible killer has taken over 300,000 lives in the last century and is estimated to take 150,000 more between now and 2030.
Facts provoke thought. Thought spurs questions. Questions ignite controversy. Make up your own mind. Conspiracy, next, only on the History Channel.